Welcome to the New Life Stories channel. We hope you will have fun with us. Enjoy watching.
People are right. In both intimacy and love, experience matters. My name is Mary, and I'm a happy girl who loves to party and have fun. In my 22 years, I've always been drawn to the magic of the night and how people seem to lose their inhibitions when the lights go out. It's like we become different people. Especially men who I seem to know like the back of my hand. I saw them all walk past me. Handsome, moneyed, respectable, married, single, with girlfriends, civil servants, and unemployed. They all passed by the bar I went to with my girlfriends, offering to put down the moon and stars for a minute's pleasure. Most of them I discarded after a few minutes for various reasons. Because if I can brag about anything, it's that I was very picky about who I left the bar with. Handsome, young, well-dressed, and decent enough to pretend that all he wanted to do was talk to me all night. Though to be honest, it was starting to bore me. It wasn't that I didn't like them anymore. But lately it annoyed me that in moments of intimacy these men seemed only interested in their pleasure and not mine. Everything happened so quickly and without emotion that my body craved the touch of someone who would take the time to explore it. I wanted something else. I shared this thought with Melanie, my best friend since childhood with whom we frequented this bar. If I was very liberal, she had almost no restrictions, so I could rely on her experience as a sort of dictionary. However, her advice to get rid of this feeling of reluctance was to try someone experienced. I wasn't very convinced by this because I knew exactly what she meant. On the other hand, I didn't want to share an intimate moment with someone older than me who had a significant age difference with me. Even when Melanie assured me that it was the most sublime feeling in the world, I refused to agree. So ignoring them, I wandered my eyes around the bar, looking for boys my age like I usually did. And that's when I saw him in the crowd. The older-looking man had an elegance that set him apart from the carefree youth around me. He looked serious but relaxed, and although his hair reflected a bit of gray, you could tell he was well preserved. He had an athletic build, he dressed well, and his strong facial features gave him a rustic and masculine look. At the time I thought I was crazy just to see a man who could very well have been the same age as my father. But as I got into the details, it seemed like a good idea. Suddenly the crazy ideas Melanie had shared with me didn't seem so strange. His appearance gave me every indication to decide that he would be the kind of prey I would want to test this theory with. We made eye contact for a moment, and I decided to wait for him to approach, as men in a bar naturally did. However, I waited in vain. Instead, his gaze continued to dwell on me, my body, and my friends as I contemplated whether to walk toward him or focus my attention on the other man who was ready to approach me. But the night went on, and the alcohol started to take its toll on my system, so I did something I'd never done in my life. First, I started talking to a man. My name is Mary, and I'm a happy girl who likes to party and have fun. He smiled in surprise. It would be very impolite to let a woman like you invite me, he replied. It's not a problem for me, I insisted. He raised an eyebrow. It is for me. Then he gestured to the waiter, who immediately appeared before us to serve. He turned his face and smiled at me again. Wine or beer? Wine. I answered immediately, trying to be subtle and not choose beer, which was the easiest option. He, on the other hand, surprised me by deciding to order a bottle of beer. We introduced ourselves to each other and were soon immersed in a conversation that flowed as if we had known each other all our lives. We talked about books, traveling, and the twists and turns that life presents. That's when I learned that his name was Richard, that he was so old, that he was married, that he had children, and other things like that. He didn't live in this town. However, I wasn't innocent enough not to notice George's gaze roaming over my body. Are you seriously 60 years old? I asked in surprise. As I feared, his age was older than my own father's. Because, don't I look like that? He replied in a flirtatious tone. I didn't answer. Then I sipped from the glass of wine he'd given me and looked at him as frankly as I could. You look very young for your age. Richard assured me that he loved sports and that it was the key to always staying young. Besides, he liked to surround himself with people younger than him, so in his town he frequented the bar where we were. If you want, I can be your tour guide, I told him. I know more bars of that style. I can recommend many, yeah? He replied, taking a sip of his beer. And what do you want in return? The music was loud and enveloping, at a fast tempo, as the most popular songs of the time tend to be. It was my key to inviting him to something that would no doubt bring us even closer. "Do you dance?" I asked him. Then I leaned on the table, getting even closer to him. That's what I want in return. It was enough to get Richard close to my body as we moved to the music. As we did so, I could feel his breath on my neck, giving me goosebumps running down my skin. At the same time, his large hands held my hips on either side and slowly guided us into a more intimate corner. At that moment, I pressed my back against the wall. His body seemed to protect mine as he continued to press himself harder and harder against me. The dancing took a back seat. We moved without listening to the music. The two of us, at such different ages, with such different lives, yet we shared something unique. The feeling of the forbidden was intoxicating because even though we were away from the hustle and bustle, I could still feel the prying eyes on me. Besides, the fact that Richard was married and touching me with his wedding ring made everything even more pleasurable. It wasn't long before I felt his hand travel down my thigh, which was covered only by a short skirt like the ones I usually wore on my night out. I could have sworn my cheeks turned crimson at that moment when I noticed him nuzzle his face against my neck and whisper a few words that made me want to lose control of myself. "Is it okay if I touch this spot?" he asked, stroking my skin up and down. I swallowed, absorbed in the sensations his seductive massage was giving me. His other hand tightened its grip on my thigh, pressing me against the wall with more force, and his foot squeezed between mine, encouraging them to open more and more. I could only nod, letting my empty mind get lost under George's skillful touch. The next thing I felt was his mouth on mine, demanding strong and fiery kisses amidst the grunts and caresses of his hands on my body. But the most pleasurable part was that I began to feel his hand near my center, as if he wanted to test out unknown territory before embarking on an adventure of no return. I appreciated that he did it that way, taking his time. I couldn't think of anything else at that moment, but I knew that those gentle caresses, those kisses that almost engulfed my mouth, were what I'd been craving for a long time. But it wasn't until his hand lay on the area I really wanted that I felt what it felt like to be in the hands of an expert. He pulled his mouth away from mine and began to intently explore my neck, very skillfully nibbling on certain areas while my fingers clenched at the sensation. The sounds coming out of my mouth were almost embarrassing, but I didn't try to control them as my mind seemed clouded from such intense arousal. It seemed like every nerve ending in my body was focused on a specific point that he knew how to play with. They were fast and strong movements, but precise at the same time, bringing me to release while I gasped, trying to regain the air I'd lost in the moment. "Look at you," he said, pulling his face away from my neck. His smile was from ear to ear as he looked at my body, which was still breathing loudly. I didn't know what he saw in me at that moment, but I knew from the glint in his eyes that he liked me. It was then that I pressed myself against his body again and dug into him with a hungry kiss that made my stomach clench again, hoping to be in his arms and at his mercy again. "Do you want to continue?" he whispered. I didn't know what to do but adjust my skirt and nod. The next thing I knew, I was in a black van, speeding through the cold city night. I didn't care where he was taking me because his hand kept playing with my leg. I bit my lip as he continued to squeeze the skin of my thighs, feeling an uncontrollable urge to clutch my legs to get rid of the sensation. But before he could say anything, we pulled up to the luxury hotel. He opened first his door and then mine, leaving the keys with the valet as we stepped inside. No one said anything, and we didn't have to go to the front desk to give our details, which is why when I least thought about it, I was lying on the soft white mattress of a bed in one of the largest rooms I had ever seen. Compared to the moment we shared at the bar, I decided to take the reins and show him that I too knew how to pleasure someone in private. Being on his body made me feel powerful. His gaze told me he approved of my every trick, and my mouth drew a straight line to his body parts that made his pants seem tight. I didn't skimp on tasting Richard with my mouth. I wanted to give him back a piece of the pleasure he'd given me, and at the same time thank him for letting me touch the stars with my fingers. But it didn't last long because he had other plans involving my body under his. That's when I realized that Maloney was right. The way Richard embraced every part of my body, the way he opened up completely as we released together, was something I couldn't compare to any other man I'd ever been with. That night, in a luxurious hotel room, an older man made me feel what I had longed to experience as a young girl. That's why my vision changed completely. From that day on, I had little interest in searching the bar for the most handsome, young, elegant, or wealthy man. Instead, I trained my eyes to look for those who, against all odds, could teach me more about myself than just believing that a man could make me explode with pleasure. It wasn't always easy, but I preferred encounters that meant something to my body and mind. Of course, Richard was still my favorite, not just a need to have someone in my bed at night. He was the only one I talked to on the phone, and we continued to meet every time I came into town. Even when I decided to let my boyfriend be my partner, Richard was still there to relieve me of the stress, anger, or frustration my boyfriend was causing me. He knew he was leading a double life, but at least neither of them felt cheated. Our connection went beyond mere physical contact, but when our bodies met, it felt wonderful, and I wouldn't trade that for anything or anyone. Dear friends, if you liked this story, please share your thoughts in the comments and put like or dislike. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Thank you all. Until new stories.